Your bike is great, but can a few small changes to on-bike ergonomics make your great bike amazing? Contact points. These are where you interact with your bike. So we're talking hands on grips, we're talking feet and shoes on pedals, and we're talking, well, pelvis or your bum on the saddle. All because you're the same height as your favourite pro rider or your pal doesn't mean that you should set your bike up exactly the same. And that's because whilst you might be the same height, you might have a different torso length, but key, you're going to have a different range of motion, and you're probably going to have a different strength as well. And all of these are big factors in on-bike fit. Another thing to be wary of or mindful of is that these changes are going to change the dynamics of your bike. So it's going to change how it rides, even these small tweaks. And finally, comfort, at least in my opinion, gets a really bad rap. And that's a shame, because do you know who's really, really comfortable? World Cup DH racers, that's who. And they're super comfortable and super fast. So when I talk about comfort, it's not a secret code for slow. So saddle choice is obviously really, really personal. There's lots of factors. And key to those sort of fit options are your pelvis and how wide it is, and where you're going to interact with the sit bones on the saddle. And the other factor, which is often overlooked, is how flexible you are. So how tight your hamstrings are and how tight your back is going to limit your range of motion and therefore change which bit of the pelvis is sat on the saddle. So an EMTB saddle versus the saddle that you might have on a regular mountain bike will be different, and that's because you're going to ride slightly differently. You're going to be sat down quite a lot more on your EMTB, and that's because you can climb steeper things. You might wonder why you might need a different saddle for your EMTB versus your MTB, and that's because how you ride the bike is really different. You're sat down a lot more, you have to spin to a higher cadence as well. So whilst you might be the same and you might have the same saddle height, how you ride the bike will be different. So features that might be useful on an EMTB saddle are a deeper padding, because you're going to be riding a lot more and through rough terrain to be able to keep traction on the rear. A scooped rear section of the saddle, so as you kind of slide back, you can push into the saddle, so much better on steeper climbs. And the last thing that's probably a good thing to have is maybe a pressure relief channel, so squish stuff doesn't get more squished. A great saddle, but a bad position isn't going to help anybody. This is just a rough guide to help you get in the window of fit so you can do some detailed tweaks. With saddle setup, you need to make sure that the nose of the saddle is flat, so you can use the scoop to help on climbs. It's a dynamic positioning, so if your sag's not even, which often it isn't, make sure that you've factored that in. Whilst we're not roadies, the legendary roadie Greg LeMond method is a great way of setting your saddle height. There's a detailed video below. That might seem high, but with dropper posts we can optimise the saddle height purely for pedalling performance, and then use the dropper to drop it out of the way for anything techie, be that climbing or descending. I've seen racers and riders struggle with arm pump and the lack of control as a result, and it's not fun and it's definitely not fast. There's a lot of factors at play. Bar position and grip choice are factors in creating a supportive setup. Arm pump is a coverall for lots of different things, but in general what it means is your muscles in your arms are overwhelmed by all the forces coming in. So the fine motions of braking, physically holding on. When it hits hard, you can completely lose grip, which is less than optimal. To find the ideal bar width, think about when you're doing a press up. If you have a really extremely wide stance or you have a really narrow stance, neither of them are going to be optimal for your muscle strength and upper body physique, but finding that midpoint is going to be perfect, and that's what you need to find with the right bar width. An overly wide bar can pull you forwards on the bike and alter both your arm and pelvic position, so you're not going to optimise your pedaling output and you're not going to be as stable as you could be. Conversely, a really narrow bar, you'll just be fighting the leverage from the front wheel and probably losing. So it's really trying to balance between an overly wide bar and a bit too narrow, and you'll find the perfect spot. Just be mindful, lots of bikes are coming with a wide stock bar, so 800 or 810. And for many people, that bar might be too wide. So do look at the options of trimming them down. You can play with grips to reposition them if you want to, and see if you want a narrow bar. We've got a video in the link below as well to have a guide of how to cut your bars. And also don't be afraid to cut your bars. You can still be really fast with a slightly less trendy narrow bar. Lots of the world's fastest racers are running sub 760 bars. One thing we've not discussed is handlebar rise. That's the difference between where it's clamped and where your hands are. If you're riding steep, technical terrain, you'll probably want to run a bar with a lot more rise, and that'll help move your body weight back. Conversely, if you're wanting to load up that front wheel and get a little bit more grip on the front wheel, running a bar with a lower rise will help move your hands down. Obviously, you can adjust the stems a little bit and raise it up and lower it, but changing the bar will make a bigger, more dramatic difference. Another factor in bar setup and bike setup is bar roll, and it's a bit of a weird term because we talk about bar roll as if we're changing the bar. All we're doing with bar roll is changing the position of some preset, pre-forged in parts of the bar. So the bar is going to have a set from the factory sweep, it's going to have an up sweep and a back sweep as well as the rise all being set. When we talk about bar roll, what we're doing is we're playing with those angles by rotating the bar in the stem, and that, due to the geometry of the bar, changes where your hands sit, and it will change whether the bar is kind of pointing up skyward or rolling the bar back a little bit. It helps move your body weight back. The best position for EMTB rider is a more neutral, almost vertical when viewed from the side position. This allows for a good weight transfer forward on the climbs and rearward on the descents. Your hand position on your bar should be in a good neutral starting point, and then just play with that bar roll for the terrain that you're riding. As bike geometry has evolved, top tubes have gotten a lot longer, head tubes have got a lot slacker, and stems have shrunk a lot. But you can still change your on-bike fit quite a bit with a stem. Just be mindful you can't go wild as you could do previously. So you could change from a 35mm to a 50 or vice versa. So match stem length with torso length. So if you've got a shorter torso, try a shorter stem. If you've got a longer torso, try a longer stem. But just be mindful, they do change the steering dynamics quite a lot, so you can't go too wild. Grip choice is as unique as your fingerprint, so choose your grip to match your physiology, your hand strength, your finger strength, where and what you're riding. The contours and textures on these grips are here for function and not style, which is why you'll see some guidance onto which side to run them and the rotation of how to run them. The sipes and contours fit with your fingers and palm to boost grip. A number of brands, Ergon included, offer different diameter grips. So these ones are fatter, so they offer a bit more support for those with larger hands or larger fingers. But you can also use them if you struggle with hand grip over long rides where you need the extra damping and extra support that the larger diameter grip can offer. Again, lots of brands also do more supportive sort of winged style grips, and they give you a lot more contact with your hand and with the grip. They can be really, really supportive. However, they do limit the range of movement. So if you're aiming for kind of horizon hunting stuff where you know your hands are going to be fixed in one place and you need lots of support, there's something to go for. But if you're looking for more support and you need a dynamic hand position, like you're doing park runs, then sometimes the fatter grips can offer more support. With an EMTB, you're going to be riding everywhere. So that means you need to optimize your brake lever and shifter and especially dropper position for that all-round riding. Whereas a cross-country race is going to set their brakes up, and it was kind of like a default for lots of people to set their brakes up with a saddle high, your arms quite low and angled. Conversely, we've had downhillers introduce a very sort of dynamic lever position where we've had levers almost level with the ground, and that's because when they're heading just downhill, they need to have the maximum ergonomic advantage for both cross-country or for the downhill rider. But as an e-bike rider, you're going to be needing to operate your dropper, your brakes all the time. So a midpoint between these two extremes is going to be the perfect place. Once we've got the angle of the lever set, the next thing to look at is the position of the lever. And lots of brakes now have got definitely a reach adjustment. So if you've got larger hands, you can kind of dial the lever out. If you've got smaller hands, you can dial it in Often they'll also have a bike point adjuster. So this is the kind of small section of travel before the brakes actually clamp on. And you can play around with this as well as the reach adjustment to find the perfect position for your fingers. The final piece of the contact point puzzle is pedals. Whether you're running clips or flats, it's really important to get this set up correctly. And that's because it's not just about pedaling performance, it's also about weight balance and body weight movements, which make finding grip much, much easier if you can kind of shimmy around on the bike. And the pedals are a key contact point for this. If you're riding clips, do take the time to set up your cleats properly. There's a video in the link below, so do have a look at that. It takes time to get it right, but it's well worth it. If you're running flats, well, lots of them have got really good pins these days and they're really grippy, but I'll say two things. One, make sure that you get the right shoes. They make a really big difference. And secondly, don't be afraid to play with the pins. Sam Hill, legendary downhill racer, used to run less pins to get more traction out of his pedals. So you too can do the same. Just be mindful that if you're starting to play with longer pins, whilst they can grip the soles of your shoes really well, they can also gouge your shins really well. So just play safely. We've talked a lot about different contact points. One final place not to overlook is your tyre pressure and also your suspension setup, as those will impact how the ride dynamics change and how your new ride dynamics of how you fit on the bike will change as well. Getting to understand all these ergonomic factors and how they impact your ride does take time and does take a bit of faff. But it then means that your riding time is really riding time, not faff time. So get the tape measure out, check your bike, make sure that it's all set up perfectly to maximise your ride time.